I'm not someone who usually spends time on adult websites, but one July evening a few months ago, I not only watched the content but also signed up for their premium subscription. I thought the $100 was well spent. I watched the live broadcast. I've seen better adult content, but something about this scene really struck me. It was a woman who was called Hot Housewife Jenna on the site, but I knew her real name was Kelly. Kelly was my wife. Hot Housewife Jenna, or Kelly, I could tell from the look on her face that she liked the process. When Kelly rolled over on the bed with a satisfied look, the man grinned and said, "Well, honey, that was pretty damn cool. I bet your husband doesn't reach my level, does he?" Hot Housewife Jenna. My Kelly smiled back and answered without hesitation. "Well, Mario, like you said, it was pretty damn cool. But just so you know, I don't like anyone like my husband. I've had a few men, but I didn't like any of them as much as he did. You're good, but he's amazing, so keep trying even harder." She smiled at him again. Mario looked puzzled and asked, "If he's so amazing, why are you cheating on him by coming here?" She replied, still smiling, "I didn't plan for this to happen, but I like the closeness. I'm also doing this because I can get away with it and he'll never know. I really love my husband with all my heart, and after spending 3 nights here, I realize how much better he has become, which makes me love and appreciate him even more." She laughed and added, "Actually, I'm probably doing him a favor by coming here and doing this. So come here and let's do it again." As I said earlier, $100 was not spent in vain, because I was able to see what my loving wife was doing, much cheaper than video surveillance equipment or the services of private detectives would have cost me. You might be wondering how I ended up here. What events led me to this moment? It's a fair question, and the most truthful answer is sheer luck, a rare stroke of good fortune that came my way. Not the kind of fortune that involves discovering my wife was sleeping with Mario, but the kind that revealed her infidelity to me. Kelly and I have been married for a little over 8 years. We first met in elementary school. We grew up in a small town in central Illinois. She lived in town, while I lived in the countryside. Her father owned the largest grain elevator in the area, and my father owned the largest grain farm. Our parents did business together, so it was natural for us to meet, attend school together, and become friends. I won't bore you with details of grade school crushes, high school romance, or even the college scene. We both dated and, yes, slept with other people. We weren't exclusive at first, but deep down we always knew we were meant to be together. I was the one who took her virginity, but there were others for both of us along the way. During our junior year at the University of Illinois, we decided to be exclusive, and sometime later I proposed. About a year and a half later, a week after we graduated, we got married. We both earned degrees in business administration. Life was good, or so I thought until that night in July. Let me continue. 3 years ago, Kelly's parents retired and moved to Phoenix, AZ. Kelly, her sister Amber, and her 2 brothers, Tom and Carl Gentry, purchased a 48% stake in the grain business from their father, Tom Sr. He wanted to maintain controlling interest for a few years to support their growth financially. Over time, he planned to gradually reduce his stake until they fully owned the business. Amber is married to a friend of mine, Walter Swanson, Wally, who is also a grain farmer. He runs a farm that's only a few hundred acres smaller than mine. We live nearby and often spend enjoyable times together. Tom and Carl jointly manage the grain business, and Kelly serves as their controller, bookkeeper. Amber works at the facility too, handling customer interactions and processing grain sales transactions. It's truly a family-run business with a few additional employees, primarily truck drivers and grain handlers. During the peak harvest season, they hire some part-time workers as well. I think that's enough background, so I should continue with the sordid tale of how I discovered my wife cheating on me online and what transpired afterward. All four of the Gentry children had invested a significant amount of extra time arranging the purchase of their father's interest in the grain business. While I wasn't heavily involved, I knew they had to work extremely hard to finalize the deal. They attended bank meetings, sessions with the Illinois Department of Agriculture, and meetings with insurers. By the end of it all, they were exhausted. Luckily, this all happened during the winter, which is the slowest period of the year for them. For me, it was post-harvest, so I didn't need Kelly on the farm as much as during my two busiest times of the year. Although she didn't do any farm work herself, managing 2,200 acres of corn and soybeans keeps me extremely busy, and I relied on Kelly for running errands and other tasks. Since we weren't busy, Kelly and Amber decided to take a few days off to relax at a spa. They booked a 3-night stay at a fittingly named spa called Princess Spas. Although I mentioned the same site earlier, the spa was actually called Princess Spas. The girls returned so relaxed and rejuvenated that they decided to do it again in July after the planting season was over. The following year, they booked another weekend. It was during that spa visit that I watched the video online. But how did I discover it? Dan Marvel, the field agent for the Illinois Department of Agriculture in our county, stopped by during a routine tour of his area. Kelly and I had known Dan in college, and he asked about her. I mentioned she was at Princess Spas on a getaway. Dan gave me a peculiar look and said something unusual was happening there that I might want to investigate. He mentioned that a cousin of his who used to work at the spa as a masseuse had shared some wild stories about the place. Dan said they even had a website with a different name, though he couldn't remember it exactly, only that it had something to do with pleasures. When I asked him to elaborate, he hesitated but suggested I check it out myself. You may not know me, but I'm an internet researcher. I go online in search of interesting content. Sometimes I come across adult websites, but mostly I find other interesting things. One evening I came across an interesting website. It didn't take long to find a live stream, and the game started. I could tell you everything that happened that night, but why bother? You know the story. It hurt me. I cried. I screamed. I got angry. I became depressed. All that a man experiences after learning about his wife's infidelity. I quickly realized that this wasn't the first time she had cheated. There was an archive folder on the site, and I found videos of her 2 previous visits, as well as videos of the 2 previous evenings when Kelly and Amber were there. Thanks to the premium subscription, I could download each video for an additional $20. I downloaded 2 videos from their first visit, 3 from their second, and 3 from their last trip, for a total of 8 videos that cost me $160. So for a total of $260, I had all the necessary evidence to divorce my wife. I just didn't have a plan for how to do it yet. But I knew I had to start right now. I wasn't going to wait a month, 2 weeks, or even 1 week for this to happen. As for me, the sooner we part, the better. She slept with another man at least 8 times, and I had video evidence. In fact, in the videos I downloaded, she was with at least 2 different men, Mario and Steve. I didn't know, and I didn't care if there was anything else. 2 men and 8 times, that was more than enough. I copied several videos onto DVDs and hid them in a safe place. When my father was building the house, he installed a wall safe, which was accessed through a hidden panel in the built-in bookcase in the office. As soon as the copies were safely hidden, I deleted all links to the site from my computer and erased all the source files. Apart from the DVD copies, there is no trace left of the evidence I have. After everything was taken care of, I grabbed my cell phone and sent a message to Kelly. Kelly, this is Jack. I know exactly what you're doing at Princess Spas, and I have evidence. Don't come back to the house, if you even plan to. This is no longer your home, and soon I won't be your husband. We're done. My lawyer will contact you in the next few days to arrange for you to collect your personal belongings. Apparently, Kelly had her phone turned off and didn't receive my message until the next morning because I didn't hear from her that night. But early the next day, my phone started ringing. I saw it was Kelly on caller ID, so I didn't answer. Shortly after, she left me a voicemail. Jack, what are you talking about, honey? I have no idea what's going on, but why would you send such terrible messages? Amber and I are packing up now, and we'll be home in a couple of hours. I don't know what you think I did, but you're wrong. I'll see you when I get there and we can talk. I love you, Jack. A short while later, my cell phone rang again. I didn't answer and let it go to voicemail. It was the same message, nearly word for word. I wondered if she had written down what she was going to say. When I didn't answer, it wasn't long before a text message came through. She was like a broken record, repeating almost verbatim what she had said in the voicemail messages. Since I didn't have to talk to her directly, I decided to send a brief reply via text so she knew I received her messages, but chose not to speak with her. I simply texted, "I wonder if Mario would have any idea about what in the world are you talking about, honey, if I asked him. Why don't you have him call me and I will ask him?" What I said about not coming back to the house I meant. Do not think you can come home. You cannot. It is over, Kelly. I didn't receive any more texts, but I did get another phone call from Kelly later that afternoon. She left a message. "Jack, we need to talk. I am staying with Amber until you and I talk and put this awful misunderstanding behind us. Please call my cell phone and talk to me." That was Sunday afternoon, and I did not return the call. The following morning, I visited my bank and arranged for an additional safe deposit box under my name alone. In it, I placed one set of DVDs and the original copy of my prenuptial agreement. Anticipating my meeting with the lawyer at 11 a.m., I had made an extra copy of the agreement, knowing he likely had one already, but wanting to avoid any potential issues. Upon arriving at my lawyer's office at the scheduled time, I found Kelly already there. She looked up at me as I entered, appearing visibly worn out. It was clear she had been crying, with disheveled hair and dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep. Typical signs when she was overstressed. "Jack, we need to discuss this," Kelly said to me. Surprised, I asked, "How did you know I was coming here?" She replied, "Richard called me when you made the appointment." At that moment, my lawyer, Richard Warner, emerged into the reception area and invited us into his office. Despite my simmering anger, I firmly stated, "No, Richard, we won't be going into your office together. You've breached my trust by contacting Kelly, and I need a direct answer from you right now. I need to know, are you going to represent me exclusively?" Lawyers are supposed to be intelligent, but this one seemed to have missed out on his share of brains. He replied, "No, Jack. If this continues, I'll be representing Kelly." As it turned out, he believed that the grain business offered better prospects than my farm business. Perhaps it was because he also had all the Gentry family members as clients. I had my own thoughts on that matter and believed he would come to regret his decision. "All right, Richard. Please have all my original documents and any copies of contracts or paperwork of mine ready by 4 p.m. today. I'll either come by to pick them up or arrange for a courier. I want you to know that I've valued your past work for me, but you're making a serious mistake here, Richard. I'll be seeking legal representation elsewhere, and my new attorney will be in touch with you soon." Kelly had remained silent throughout the entire conversation, but now she looked at Jack with a pleading expression and asked, "Jack, why won't you talk to me now to resolve this?" "Because, Kelly, it's clear that Richard values you more as a client than he values me. I won't discuss this without legal representation, and frankly, I don't trust him." Richard interjected, "Jack, I've always been honest with you. There's nothing to fear." "Oh, Richard, I have plenty to fear. They say you can't serve two masters, and it's obvious whose side you've chosen here. Besides, you've already shown you can't be trusted by bringing Kelly into this. Goodbye. My attorney will be in touch." I heard Kelly start to cry as I walked out the door. Damn, now I needed a new lawyer. I knew David Warner was highly competent and competitive with Richard. He seemed like a good option, but I wouldn't rush into it without doing some research. Lawyers, accountants, bankers, and insurance agents are people you get intimately involved with, and you need to know exactly who you're dealing with. I understood that attorney-client relationships are especially critical because of the privileged information involved. I knew a few people who had used David's services, so I called his law office and asked for references. The secretary confirmed they had a list and promised to email it to me. I decided to visit 3 out of the 4 friends who were on the list to gather their opinions on David's work. Each of them quickly gave glowing recommendations for him, leaving me with no doubt that he would perform well for me. I opted not to visit the 4th friend, Wally, who is married to Kelly's sister Amber, as I didn't want to involve him. Afterwards, I called David's office again, introducing myself and requesting an appointment after 4 p.m. The receptionist informed me that he was occupied until 4:30 p.m. but would check if he could meet with me afterwards. Though there was a chance he might not be available, I was determined to try. When she returned, she confirmed that Mr. Warner could see me at 4:30 p.m., albeit briefly due to prior commitments that evening. I agreed to the arrangement and assured her I would arrive just before the appointed time. She responded, "I look forward to seeing you then, Mr. Hagen. By the way, my name is Samantha. I am David's wife." At 4 p.m., I visited Richard's office to pick up my paperwork, but they hadn't finished making copies yet. It was clear they were delaying, hoping I would reconsider. I lost my temper and insisted they provide every piece of my legal paperwork within the next 15 minutes, or else my new attorney would contact them. They inquired about my new attorney, but I simply informed them they would find out soon enough. After that, the office suddenly became very busy. They had 3 people copying documents simultaneously, and within 20 minutes I had everything I needed. I still managed to reach David's office on time for my appointment, so I didn't press further about the delay. During my meeting with David, he agreed to represent me for both personal and business matters. I asked if I could leave all the paperwork I had gathered with him for safekeeping, and he agreed to store it in his vault until we could review it together. We scheduled a meeting for the following day at 9 a.m. to go through everything and devise a plan for my divorce. When I left the office at 5:30 p.m., I smiled at Samantha and asked, "Well, Samantha, did my visit disrupt your evening plans?" She grinned and replied, "You handled everything perfectly, Mr. Hagen. Our plans are still on track. I wish all our clients were as punctual as you've been. By the way, please call me Sam from now on." "Thank you, Sam. And please, call me Jack." The following morning, we went over all my business documents and contracts. I can't go into details here due to attorney-client privilege. However, I can share that David found everything to be in order from a business standpoint. We took a break for lunch, and David and Sam invited me to join them at the local diner. I agreed and met them there after stopping at my bank. They were a delightful couple, and we had a pleasant lunch together. I learned that they had graduated a few years ahead of me from school. David mentioned he was in the same class as Tom Gentry, but they weren't close. Apparently, they were quite competitive with each other. I learned that they had been married for approximately 10 years and had 2 daughters aged 6 and 3. They showed me photos. The 2 little girls were very cute and clearly took after their mother. They both had beautiful smiles, much like Sam's. Lunch seemed to lift my spirits considerably. It helped me establish a better rapport with my new attorney. However, it also reminded me painfully that my life partner was no longer with me. David and Sam were an amazing team, reminiscent of how things used to be with Kelly before I discovered her infidelity. It saddened me deeply, and I found myself tearing up a couple of times. David didn't seem to notice, but Sam did. She looked concerned. After lunch, I stopped by the bank to make some adjustments to safeguard my assets. I also picked up a $5,000 check made out to David Warner Law Offices, intended as a retainer for their upcoming work for me. Although David hadn't requested it yet, I knew he would appreciate the gesture. I returned to the office at 1:30 p.m. to continue our meeting. Sam informed me that David was on a call, so she escorted me to the small conference room where we had been meeting. She asked if I wanted coffee or anything else. I declined, saying I was fine. She sat beside me and reached out her hand. "David didn't tell me what's happening, Jack. but I can guess from your reactions at lunch what this afternoon will be about. I see you're wearing a wedding ring, so I assume it involves your wife. If you'll allow me, I'd like to ask David to let me stay in here with you this afternoon while we address whatever you need to discuss." I felt myself nearing another emotional breakdown, so I simply nodded in agreement. At that moment, my anger had subsided, overshadowed by a deeper sense of hurt. Having a woman nearby with their sensitivity seemed comforting. I realized I might need Sam's sympathetic presence. During the afternoon meeting, I recounted the entire ordeal of discovering Kelly's infidelity. I broke down a few times, and Sam stepped in to offer sympathy and comfort. Once I regained composure, I disclosed my intentions. Unless something changes my mind, I plan to proceed with divorce and enforce the terms of our prenuptial agreement. David and I thoroughly reviewed the prenuptial agreement. The terms are as follows. I retain 100% ownership of all farm assets, real estate, and personal property. Kelly keeps 100% ownership of the grain business assets. Kelly receives 50% of our financial assets if there was no infidelity. In case of infidelity, Kelly receives $25,000 per year of infidelity instead of 50%. Household personal property is split 50-50 regardless of circumstances. "Jack, I need to see the evidence of infidelity," David requested. "No, David. I have the evidence, but I won't share it now or with anyone else unless we go to court. Then I'll present it to the judge." David insisted. "Jack, I need to see it myself to confirm we have a case of infidelity. I have to be certain." "David, you have to trust me. I have the evidence, but I cared for Kelly, and I don't want anyone else to see what I've seen unless it's absolutely necessary." Sam touched David's arm and nodded. Reluctantly, David agreed. Over the next few days, Kelly called me multiple times and left messages. I didn't answer her calls and deleted the messages without listening to them. David called me and said, "We've scheduled a meeting for Thursday, just you and me, and Kelly and Richard." On Thursday morning at 10:30, David and I drove to Richard's office to meet with him and Kelly. When we arrived, I noticed Kelly's car already in the parking lot, so we proceeded inside. Richard's receptionist guided us to a small conference room, where we waited briefly until Richard and Kelly joined us. Kelly appeared much better than she had earlier in the week when I last saw her at Richard's office. Clearly, she had prepared herself for the meeting, looking quite beautiful. I made an effort to conceal my emotions, not wanting her to know how much I still cared for her. She smiled at me and said, "Jack, I hope we can finally talk and put this misunderstanding behind us. I miss you and want to come home." I remained silent, afraid my voice would betray my emotions. I needed to compose myself, though I knew it wouldn't be easy. David spoke next. "We're here to discuss the divorce proceedings for Jack and Kelly's marriage dissolution. I suggest we begin by allowing each party the opportunity to share their thoughts on how they wish to proceed." Richard nodded in agreement and added, "My client believes this is all a misunderstanding and is eager to clarify things and speak with her husband." I had been struggling to manage my emotions, but Richard inadvertently helped me. He reignited my anger, which was now boiling inside me. Knowing I could control this anger made it easier to handle my other emotions, my hurt and disappointment in Kelly. I reassured myself that I would be all right. I calmly told Richard, "That's fine with me. Your client can talk to her husband." Then, I turned to Kelly and stated, "Kelly, let's clarify some things. When we got married, we signed a prenuptial agreement. We updated it 2 years ago when you invested in your father's business. I've brought copies of the revised agreement for everyone here." Kelly appeared shocked. She quietly pleaded, "But Jack, I don't want a divorce. I want to remain your wife. Can't we resolve this misunderstanding and go back home happy together?" I brushed off her plea and continued. "Our goal was always to protect our individual interests while enjoying the benefits of our marriage. Initially, the prenuptial agreement safeguarded assets from my family's long-standing wealth. Later, it extended to protect assets tied to your family's business, which you joined. In case of divorce, our agreement specifies that I will keep 100% of the assets from my family, while you will keep 100% of the assets from your family. Any debts related to those business assets will belong to the business, with no responsibility falling on the other party. Since we both contributed to our marital assets, our agreement outlines specific financial and property divisions depending on the circumstances of our divorce. This document clearly states that you are entitled to all your personal belongings, such as clothes, jewelry, your car, and other items of personal nature. Similarly, I have the same entitlement on my side. All other non-farm personal property like furniture, artwork, electronics, etc., will be divided equally, 50-50. Farm-related personal property such as grain bins, machinery, and equipment will remain entirely mine as they are essential to the farming operations. In the event of divorce, the monetary distribution to you will be 50% of financial assets, if there is no infidelity. There are 2 exceptions specified in the document regarding distribution in case of infidelity. If you divorce me due to infidelity, I would receive only $25,000 annually or $200,000 total, not 50%. If I divorce you for infidelity, the distribution would be $25,000 annually or $200,000 total, not 50%. I'm going to ask you some questions, Kelly. Your answers will determine whether I proceed with the divorce and on what grounds. Naturally, this will also affect any financial distributions that may result. Jack emphasized the importance of Kelly answering each question with complete honesty if their marriage stood any chance of survival. He made it clear that any refusal or deception would end their relationship. He asked Kelly if she understood and if she was willing to comply in order to save their marriage. Kelly appeared shocked by Jack's serious tone as he recited terms reminiscent of their prenuptial agreement. After a moment, she gathered herself and assured Jack that she would answer truthfully. She expressed her love for him and her desire to make their marriage work, willing to do whatever it took to end their current strife and return home. Jack then proposed recording their conversation, to which Kelly hesitated momentarily, seeking advice from Richard, who had been quiet until then. Richard, taking a cautious legal stance, advised against recording but left the decision to Kelly. David, Jack's lawyer, supported Richard's advice but deferred to Kelly's judgment, emphasizing that Jack needed to be convinced. Kelly, determined to resolve their misunderstanding, agreed to the recording, allowing any conversation between her and Jack to be taped. Setting a tape recorder on the table to capture their discussion, Jack prepared to ask his questions, and Kelly inquired, "Jack, what are your questions?" "Kelly, I want to ask you about your loyalty, but I want to ask a question covering 3 different time periods. The first period is from the moment we agreed to be together until the day of our engagement. Have you been faithful to me during this time?" Kelly smiled and replied, "Yes, Jack, I've been faithful to you all this time." She thought she had scored points, but her smile turned to shock when I replied, "Well, that's lie number 1. You couldn't even answer the first question honestly. I could leave right now, but I won't do it yet." "Are you telling me that you didn't sleep with Larry Evandale 2 days after we started dating? Is that what you're saying?" "Larry was that kind of guy, Kelly. He bragged to me that you invited him over on Tuesday night when your parents weren't home, and you were intimate on your bed. At parting, he said to me, 'Jack, she liked it. I bet I'll have a better chance of being with her, even after you marry her.' Now you can say that he made it all up, but strangely enough, Amber heard everything. She came to me after Larry left and said, 'Jack, Kelly loves you and won't cheat on you anymore. It was just a goodbye. Please don't do anything rash.' So, Kelly, you've already lied to me. I can understand what happened even if I don't like it. I will ignore this lie, but no more. From now on, tell me the truth or face the consequences. After that incident, I lost faith in you, so I closely monitored your actions for the next 6 months. Throughout that entire period, you did nothing to raise suspicions in me. Eventually, I proposed to you and gave you the ring you're wearing now. I knew you might have wanted it sooner, but I wasn't ready to trust you fully, so you had to wait. Question number 2. From the day you received the ring until our wedding day, did you cheat on me, Kelly? Without hesitation, she replied, "No, absolutely not." I anticipated that answer because I continued to observe her for another year, until I felt confident enough to trust her completely. I was nearly certain she had been faithful to me during that time. To his credit, Richard suggested a break. He wanted to confer with his client and allow her time to compose herself. Both he and I had noticed Kelly becoming very emotional during my discussion about Larry Evandale, and he wanted to give her a chance to regain her composure before we proceeded. We took a lunch break, and David and I swung by his office to pick up Sam. We headed to the local diner for the daily special. During lunch, Sam inquired about the situation. David responded, "I think Jack is holding up. Not much has surfaced yet, but he's prepared for an honest discussion about our marriage. If Kelly admits everything, Jack might still consider divorce, or he might recognize her genuine desire to save our marriage. It's a tough decision, but I believe he'll manage. Of course, if she lies, Jack will have to decide how to proceed." Sam glanced at me, her intuition sensing my distress. I managed a weak smile and said, "This isn't easy at all. Why do people do such foolish things and cause so much pain?" She reached over, placing her hand on mine, and remarked, "If only we knew, Jack. We could intervene before they make such stupid mistakes." We all chuckled at that, even David. Despite the difficult circumstances, I found myself laughing. I suppose it speaks to the resilience of humanity. People cry at funerals, but they also find moments of laughter. Likewise, they mourn divorces but can still find reasons to laugh. I thanked Sam with a smile, saying, "That really helped, Sam." She simply nodded. Around 1 p.m., we returned to Richard's office for our meeting with Kelly. Before proceeding, I reminded Kelly, "You must answer these questions truthfully. Any deception will end this meeting and extinguish any hope for our marriage. Do you understand?" Kelly affirmed, "Yes, I understand, and I will tell you the truth." "Kelly," I asked, "from the day we got married until now, have you ever cheated on me?" I saw her eyes fill with tears, and I felt deep sympathy because I understood how much pain she must be in. Yet, I couldn't console her or let her off the hook. I desperately needed her to value our marriage enough to confess everything. I wasn't sure if I could prevent the divorce if she told me the whole truth. However, I would at least know that if she did, it meant she cared enough to try to save our relationship. "Yes, Jack, I did cheat on you," she replied. She rested her head on her folded arms on the table and wept. "I'm so sorry, Jack. Can you ever forgive me?" I asked Richard and David to leave the room because I had more questions for Kelly, and I didn't want to embarrass her in front of those men. They both objected, but I insisted David leave, and Kelly signaled to Richard that she wanted him to go as well. I had her confession of infidelity recorded. It would be sufficient evidence for a divorce hearing, and I didn't want the remainder of our conversation on tape, so I turned it off. "Kelly, answer these questions. When, where, who, and why?" She sniffled a few times. "Oh, Jack, I'm so sorry. It happened this weekend at Princess Spa. I cheated with one of the masseurs named Mario. I'm not entirely sure why it happened, Jack. I suppose it was just a moment of passion. Amber and I had been having such a wonderful day, and after a lovely dinner, we both decided to get massages before going to bed. Mario was my massage therapist. I was lying face down on the massage table in the room. Mario started the massage, and I felt incredibly calmed. He did everything professionally, and I didn't worry about anything. Later, he focused on my back and shoulders again, where I still felt tension. Then I felt that he was doing something unnecessary. Since I was still lying face down, I didn't immediately react. I must admit I was pleased, and I did not resist. I didn't know then that the situation would get out of my control. At that moment, tears welled up again, and she continued, "Oh, Jack, if I could turn back time, I would never let this happen. We wouldn't be in this situation right now. Please believe me." Despite the emotional shock caused by her confession, I asked her to continue. Not because of any lustful interest, but because I needed to understand the whole story to the end. "Please, Kelly, go on. Tell me everything." After that, his actions became more assertive. Then his hand reached out. "You know?" She paused, overcome with remorse. I do not know why, but I did not stop him. "Oh my God, Jack, I'm so sorry. I do not know what to say. Please forgive me. Please." I sat there, hoping she would continue, but she was silent, her head down and sniffing from time to time. Eventually, she looked up at me questioningly. "Jack, is there any chance that you'll forgive me?" I didn't want to approach this as a trial scenario, but in a sense, it seemed to me that it was. And I asked her, "Kelly, is this true? The whole truth? And nothing but the truth?" She gave me a strange look in which curiosity was mixed with uncertainty, a silent question about how much I know. Finally, she said, "Yes, Jack. That's exactly what happened. I'm really sorry." At that moment, despite the overwhelming pain of her betrayal and my anger over her lies, I managed to maintain composure. I rose from the table, walked to the door and called David and Richard back into the room. Turning to both men, I declared, "This meeting is concluded." As I reached the door, I turned back to face Kelly. "Kelly, I am filing for divorce due to your infidelity. The terms of our prenuptial agreement will be upheld." Her reaction was one of shock. "But why, Jack? I admitted my mistake and I'm begging for your forgiveness to save our marriage. Please, Jack, please, I love you so much. Please forgive me." "Kelly, you lied to me. You didn't value our marriage enough to come clean. Even if you had, I'm not sure I could have forgiven you, but you never gave us a chance. You had the opportunity to be honest, but you chose not to. I know about more than just the one instance with Mario. I have the evidence. I warned you that honesty was crucial, but you didn't care enough about me or our marriage to be truthful. It's over." I turned back, opened the door, and began walking through. She cried out, "Wait, Jack. I'll tell you everything. Everything you want to know. Please don't leave me." I spun around again, staring at her with all the hurt and anger I could muster. "You were warned. You had your chance. You thought one episode would suffice, so you lied. You had your chance, Kelly." I shouted back, "It's over." David caught up with me as I reached my car. He grabbed my arm and asked, "Are you really going to file charges for infidelity?" "Yes, I am." She had her chance. I must have misjudged her all these years. I wanted her to care enough to confess everything, but she couldn't even be honest with me now. "Go ahead and file." I drove to our house, now my house, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. In fact, I grabbed two and went into my office, downing the first one quickly. I sipped the second one slowly as I reflected on everything that had transpired. I had multiple copies of the video downloads stashed away in safe places, but I doubted I'd need to make them public with her confession in hand. My head snapped up when I realized I'd left the tape in the office. I called David urgently. "This is Jack. Did you grab the tape of Kelly's confession before you came after me?" "Oh, shit," I heard him reply. "No, Jack. I forgot completely. I ran after you and it slipped my mind. I'm so sorry. I had been meticulous in planning everything, but my emotions got the best of me when I stormed out in anger without my tape, ruining everything. Damn." "Well, David, maybe you could call Richard to see if you can go back and pick it up. But they'll probably say something like, we assumed you had everything, so we erased it. Sorry." "I doubt you'll manage to get it back, but even if not, I have enough evidence for the infidelity case." "Okay, man, I'm sorry. I know you didn't want to resort to using the video downloads, but you might have to if she contests the infidelity charge. Don't worry about it, David. It'll all work out." After hanging up with David, I grabbed another beer from the fridge. Damn, how could I be so stupid? I wasn't drunk, but I was definitely feeling the effects as I watched the evening news before heading to bed. I thought I heard a vehicle in the yard, so I slowly got up and went to the back door. Stepping onto the porch, I saw a dark figure just before the lights went out. Something struck me on the back of my head, and then all I saw was bright light before drifting into darkness. Beep, beep, beep. I heard nearby. It didn't take long to realize the sound was next to me. I opened my eyes and tried to turn to my right, but intense pain surged through me. It felt like my chest might explode, and pain shot up into my head with flashes of light. What the hell? I thought. I heard some movement nearby and felt a rush through my body before blacking out again. The next time I heard the beeping, I opened my eyes and glanced around cautiously, avoiding any sudden movements. I had learned my lesson from before. Across from me, seated in a chair, was a nurse. I attempted to turn slowly this time, but found myself unable to move. "Hi, Jack, I'm Susan, your nurse. Please try not to move, okay? Everything's going to be fine, and I'll explain everything to you, but for now, please remain still. Can you hear me?" I felt something in my throat, but managed a slight nod to indicate that I understood. "Jack, I need to inform the doctor that you're awake. We'll be right back, okay?" Again, I nodded in acknowledgement. It was beginning to sink in that I must be injured and in a hospital, although I couldn't recall what had happened. I figured someone would fill me in eventually, so I kept my eyes closed until I sensed their return. "Mr. Hagen, Jack, I'm Dr. Julius. You sustained severe injuries from a beating during a robbery at your home. I'm confident you'll recover, but we had to restrain you to prevent further injury from sudden movements. You must have felt intense pain when you tried to move yesterday, correct?" I managed a slight smile and nodded in agreement with the pain. "Yes, perhaps we should have been more proactive with the restraints to spare you that discomfort. I apologize for that. Nurse Johnson, you can remove the restraints now. But Mr. Hagen, please refrain from doing anything independently just yet, all right?" I nodded, then gestured towards the tube in my throat. "Indeed, we'll remove the ventilator now. Nurse Johnson will take care of it." The restraints were lifted and the tube removed. My throat was raw, and talking was difficult. After a sip of water, I managed to whisper, "Can someone please tell me what happened to me?" "Jack, it's 7:00 a.m. You've just woken up and been taken off the ventilator. Your throat will be sore for a few hours, so rest is crucial right now. Nurse Johnson will stay with you, and once you're ready, we'll inform the police that you're able to speak. I'll give you some time to recover first, but eventually you'll need to talk to them so they can explain everything that happened. I was informed by the doctor that you have suffered significant injuries, including a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and multiple bruises. One of your ribs punctured your lung, causing it to collapse. But the EMTs arrived in time to revive you. They repaired the damage and reinflated your lung, which was fortunate, Jack. Had you not been found promptly, the outcome could have been much worse. To put it plainly, you've been through quite an ordeal. You were unconscious for 5 days, briefly regained consciousness yesterday, and then fell back asleep until today. We'll continue to monitor you closely for a few more days, but you'll likely be discharged soon." True to their word, I spent the rest of that day resting with Nurse Johnson, keeping a close watch. Moving caused me intense pain, so I remained still for the most part. By late afternoon, I managed to sit up with considerable help and even use the restroom. Susan, who I learned was Nurse Johnson's first name, and I had some time to chat. It turned out she had been 3 years behind me in school, known as Susan Fisk back then. She had since married Chad Johnson and had a 3-year-old daughter named Emily. Unfortunately, Chad, like Kelly, had been unfaithful, leading to their divorce. I shared with her the challenges I'd been facing with Kelly, and she was genuinely sympathetic. The following morning, bright and early, I found myself in the company of two police detectives, Harold Robbins and Josh Carter. Before they delved too deeply into their questioning, I requested an overview of the events concerning me. Detective Robbins explained, "It appears you were the victim of a robbery that escalated into an assault. Beside you on the porch, we discovered a 2x4 with traces of your hair and blood. It had no fingerprints, suggesting the perpetrator wore gloves." He added, "The entry door to your house showed no signs of forced entry, likely because you exited onto the porch with the door already open." Continuing, he detailed, "Upon searching the premises, we observed several missing pictures from the walls, an empty strongbox in a desk drawer, ransacked file cabinets in the office, and rummaged drawers and closets in the bedrooms. There were also empty compartments in a jewelry box in the master bedroom. Clearly, there are indications of a robbery, though we're uncertain as to the extent of what was taken." Detective Carter interjected, "Once you're able to return home, you'll need to assess the situation and identify as best you can what items are missing. The doctor mentioned it might be another 3 or 4 days before you're discharged. Once you're back, we'll review everything together and update our reports accordingly." Robbins surged ahead in the conversation, indicating it was time for some inquiries. "What can you recall about the incident and what followed?" "Well," I began, "I'm afraid my memory is quite fuzzy. I had a couple of beers and was watching the evening news when I heard a vehicle pull into the yard. I went to investigate and stepped onto the porch, where I glimpsed a figure in the shadows just before the lights went out. After that, I don't remember anything until yesterday. I doubt I can offer much assistance in identifying the perpetrator." "Understood," Robbins nodded. "Nevertheless, there are a few more questions we need to ask. Where was your wife during this time?" "My wife and I are separated," I explained. "We're in the process of divorcing, so I have no idea where she was at that moment." "Mr. Hagen, may I call you Jack?" "Of course. Is your divorce proceeding smoothly, or is there contention between you two?" "It's not going well," I admitted. "She's challenging the grounds I intend to file for." "And what grounds are those?" "I'm filing based on infidelity. Our prenuptial agreement significantly reduces her settlement under those terms, which she's disputing." "Well, that certainly provides motive for her to cause you harm," Robbins remarked. "Detective," I interjected, "I don't believe she would ever harm me. I just can't imagine it." "That's all right," he interrupted. "We'll certainly examine it closely as part of our thorough investigation. Are there any other individuals who might have a motive? Any business relationships that might have soured? Disagreements with neighbors, friends, family, or anyone else?" "No, I can't think of anything." "All right, Jack. We'll need to take a complete inventory of what was taken once you're able, but for now, 2 things. Did you have any cash in the house, possibly in a safe? How much was it? And did you have other valuables like jewelry or artworks worth thousands of dollars or more?" "Yes, there was some cash in the safe. I'd estimate around $8,000. Normally, I keep about $10,000, but I've spent some recently. There were a few pieces of jewelry worth over $1,000 each. Nothing else of significant value that I can recall right now." I hadn't mentioned the hidden safe behind the bookcase yet. The detective hadn't brought it up, and I was fairly certain no one had found it. I wanted to keep that a secret if possible. Well, Jack, that should be all for today. If anything comes to mind, please don't hesitate to call. When you're ready to return home, let me know so we can conduct that inventory. We'll stop by here or visit you at home if we have any more questions. Over the next 4 days, my condition steadily improved. I often took naps during the day, but I also spent time chatting with Susan. I had several visitors, including Wally, Amber, David, and Sam. Kelly didn't come to see me, and aside from Amber, none of her family visited either. Given the circumstances, I understood, but I would have appreciated their presence. Richard, Kelly's attorney and a longtime friend before the divorce, did visit, and I was grateful for his company. Everyone expressed sympathy for my injury and wished me well. Both Amber and Sam kissed me on the cheek goodbye, their eyes welling with tears. There were challenging moments during those 4 days. Even though I slept, I had troubling dreams, waking up panicked with tears in my eyes. Sometimes I didn't recognize where I was upon waking, but Susan was always there with comforting words and gentle touches. Once I even woke myself up screaming, although I couldn't recall the content of the nightmares or why I had screamed. Later on, I discovered that she stayed at the hospital with me even after her shift ended, only going home to clean up and change clothes each day. She explained it was because what was happening in my marriage really touched her heart, and she wanted to support me. I was deeply grateful for her dedication. Dr. Julius came by to inform me that I would be discharged soon. I was relieved and began preparing to leave immediately. Susan assisted me with getting ready and even wheeled me down to the lobby where Wally and Amber were waiting to take me home. She wished me well and gave me a warm hug. I knew she genuinely cared for me, and I appreciated her. But my life was in turmoil due to issues with my marriage and health, so I didn't pursue a closer relationship with her. I mentioned that I would like to call her sometime in the future, and that was the extent of it. When I entered my house, I noticed the mess still lingering. Wally and Amber offered to help tidy up, but I declined, preferring to leave things as they were until I had thoroughly checked everything. I assured them I would call when I needed their assistance. Reluctantly, they agreed and departed. My first move was to enter the office and inspect the safe hidden behind the bookcase. Everything remained intact inside: cash, certificates of deposit, stocks, and bonds. It was evident the safe hadn't been discovered, or these items would have been taken. The DVD containing evidence of Kelly's infidelity was also securely stored. After a thorough search of the office, I found nothing missing apart from some cash, my laptop, and a few numbered prints of wildlife by Terry Redlin. I did notice bank statements and credit card statements spread out on the desk, indicating someone had gone through them. I promptly called both banks and credit card companies to alert them that my account numbers may have been compromised, advising them to watch for any unusual activity. After a few weeks, progress in the investigation of the robbery and assault was sluggish due to the lack of evidence linking anyone to the crime. Detectives Robbins and Carter kept me updated regularly, but thus far no new leads had emerged. They mentioned that since the stolen items weren't high in value, attempts to trace them through usual channels were futile. During our last conversation, they both suggested that the case would be placed on the back burner unless substantial evidence surfaced. In the initial phase of their inquiry, they had raised some serious questions about Kelly and me. I had been forthright and cooperative for the most part. I strongly believed that Kelly wouldn't harm me, and questioned why she would take items she would eventually gain in the divorce anyway. It seemed the detectives shared my perspective, as their inquiries led to no further action. I had opened new bank accounts and ordered new checks because I suspected my old accounts had been compromised. Fortunately, there was no suspicious activity, but I still felt safer with the new accounts. I also bought a new laptop and reorganized my office, getting everything back on track. When I finally sat down to catch up on paying bills, I found one from Red SS Inc. It triggered a realization for the first time since the robbery. Red SS was short for Remote Electronic Data Storage Solutions. I had video surveillance covering my yard, including the house, grain bins, and machine shed. The footage was stored on a computer in my grain office and uploaded nightly to Red SS for backup. I paid a monthly fee based on the stored data and regularly deleted old footage to manage costs. Since the robbery, I hadn't deleted anything. I had footage of the incident. I immediately logged into Red SS's website, retrieved the footage from the day of the robbery, and downloaded it to my laptop for review. I hoped the quality would be good enough to identify the perpetrators. If it was, I planned to make a copy on DVD for Detectives Robbins and Carter to reignite the investigation. As I watched through the footage, I realized there was nothing useful for the detectives. It became clear to me that they would likely never solve the crime. The remaining bills were settled, and I began plotting my path forward in life. I decided to reconnect with an old college friend employed at Cargill, one of the largest grain traders in the U.S. Through him, I arranged a meeting with the decision-makers in their acquisition department. It's remarkable how personal connections can expedite things. Within 2 weeks, I had ironed out my plans with Cargill and took a brief detour to Las Vegas. After handling some business in Phoenix, I drove up to Vegas for a bit of gambling. 2 days later, I returned home and put my plans into motion. I phoned David and had him arrange a meeting for me with Kelly, her brothers Tom and Carl, and her sister Amber at Gentry Grain. I instructed him to mention that due to my impending divorce, the state's grain storage requirements would no longer be met since my grain wouldn't be included. David conveyed that I wished to discuss the situation and find a resolution with them. I believe David surprised them when they agreed so readily to meet with me. It seems they hadn't considered the implications if my input was no longer in play. As I entered the office, I greeted them all. "Hello, Tom, Carl, Amber, Kelly. I suppose you understand one of the reasons I thought it necessary for us to sit down and address some issues." Tom began to speak, but I raised my hand, saying, "I convened this meeting, and I suggest you all listen to what I have to say before commenting. I truly believe it's in everyone's best interest. Firstly, let's finalize this divorce if you would. Apologies for the jab, Kelly." Placing the latest draft of the divorce papers in front of Kelly, I instructed, "Please sign these." She said to Jack, "I don't want to divorce you. Whatever you think I did, it's not worth throwing away all the good years we've had. I wish you could forgive me and we could work through our problems. I definitely don't want to discuss this in front of my brothers and sister. Kelly, we're ending this now. There's no future left for our marriage, and the sooner you sign these papers, the sooner we can both move on." Her face turned red and she blurted out, "Even if you divorce me, I intend to contest the infidelity accusation. It's the least you can do for me." I anticipated she might bring that up and responded, "If you choose to contest the infidelity issue, Kelly, I'll have no choice but to submit this DVD as evidence." And I placed a copy of the DVD on the table alongside the divorce papers. "In case you're wondering, it's a video showing all 8 times you cheated on me at the spa." Amber's face turned bright red as she looked at Kelly. "You didn't do that? Kelly, how could you? You told me that you did the same thing as me. You stopped them as they approached. How could you do this to Jack?" "Yes, Amber. She did it. She slept with Mario the first night Stephen approached you. Then she slept with Stephen the next night. During your second visit, she slept with Mario all 3 nights, and during the last visit, she did it with him 3 times. So, 8 videos of you with Mario and Steve should allay my concerns about adultery. Sign the divorce papers now, Kelly, or I'll sue. I'm tired of playing games with you." I could see that Tom and Carl were also shocked. Amber cried quietly while Kelly signed the divorce papers. I gave her 1 copy and put the rest in my briefcase. Kelly had a numb expression on her face. There were tears in her eyes. For what reason, I couldn't tell. It didn't matter. She looked stunned that I had evidence of her multiple infidelities, but she was in for an even bigger shock. Now let's turn to another pressing problem: the grain situation. I see that you are all shocked by what I have just told you, so I will be brief, but unfortunately, this is not very good news. Unfortunately, as a result of this divorce, you will no longer be able to use my grain stored in your reserves. This means that you are violating your grain license and loan agreements. I successfully convinced your father to sell me his 52% stake in the business, as there was no clause in your agreement giving you the first right to purchase. It seems Richard didn't fully protect your interests in the sale. Although I didn't need to show evidence of your wrongdoing, your father believed I had it and found the decision straightforward. Recognizing the company's need for my investment, he sold me his shares, making me the majority owner of Gentry Grain, Inc. Each of you now holds 12%, collectively constituting a minority share of 48%. However, I've arranged to sell my controlling interest in Gentry Grain to Cargill, who are interested in expanding in the grain sector, and found Gentry Grain a suitable candidate at the negotiated price. The upside is that you have the option to sell your shares to them at the same rate. I advise you to consider this opportunity as I secured a favorable deal. Unfortunately, this means your company will now be under new ownership, and they will assess employees to determine their contributions. On the positive side, I ensured each of you has guaranteed employment for a year. I strongly suggest you prove your value during this period. Additionally, I've sold my farm to Cargill, and Wally has done the same, with a commitment to manage both farms long-term for them. We're confident Wally will continue to excel in his role. The shock evident on all their faces deepened, mingling now with traces of anger. Tom, the eldest and unofficial leader of the Gentry clan, was the first to speak. "What on earth have you done, Jack? You've ruined our family business because my sister cheated on you. What kind of man are you, anyway? How did you convince my father to sell you his shares? What lies did you feed him?" "I'll tell you what, Tom," I replied. "Your father sold me his shares to keep you, Carl, and Kelly out of jail. Instead of asking what kind of man I am, perhaps you should question what kind of people you, your brother, and your sister are." I tossed a second DVD onto the table. "This video will answer all your questions. It shows your truck in my yard the night I was attacked. It shows you and Carl assaulting me. It shows you leaving my house with my belongings. Count yourselves lucky I chose revenge over involving Detectives Robbins and Carter." Finally, Kelly spoke up. "Jack, how could you do this to me? Kelly, your situation is different. With you, I feel like I've wasted my life. Your father treated mine with respect, but always saw him as a dumb farm boy. Tom and Carl treated me similarly, thinking they were superior. You were my best friend, yet you often acted superior to me. I could always sense it. You were deceitful in our relationship. You promised exclusivity and promptly slept with Larry Evandale. You were unfaithful, disrespecting me and our marriage with other men. When you watch that video, remember, I saw every moment, heard every word. And to make matters worse, Kelly, you've proven to be a terrible best friend. Do you realize I nearly died in that attack? One of my ribs was broken and punctured my lung, causing it to collapse. If the paramedics hadn't arrived in time, I might not have survived. Interestingly, it was Tom and Carl who broke my ribs, but it was your boot that delivered 3 or 4 kicks that drove that broken rib into my lung. Kelly, you nearly killed the man you claim to love so dearly. I'd say that makes you a pretty awful friend, wouldn't you agree?" Kelly had fainted. Amber and Carl rushed to her side to prevent her from falling out of her chair. Amber then fetched a cold cloth to help revive her. Once she regained consciousness, I delivered my final message. "Now you know your father sold me his shares to keep all 3 of you out of jail. He isn't very proud of his children, except you, Amber, and I'm sure you'll hear plenty about that in the future. As I said earlier, I believe I've wasted most of my life on you, Kelly, but I won't waste any more of my future. Have a good life." With that, I walked out the door, having settled all matters. I was free to move on, and I intended to do just that.